How do you know what eMTB to choose when most brands have no classification? They are simply mountain electric bikes, which is actually quite a good thing because you will be quickly navigated to an abundance of beautiful off-road two-wheel machines. But that doesn't help you, the rider, pinpoint exactly what bike complements your needs. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at 10 broad groups of eMTB which you might want to consider before putting your hand in your pocket. Of course, some brands actually do have categories. For example, comfort, sport, tour, trail, all mountain, enduro. Except that by populating some of those boxes with the same bike doesn't actually help. And then what exactly is trail? What is all mountain? What's the difference between enduro and super enduro? What's urban cross? I've not even mentioned downhill yet. At the same time, we're actually being bombarded by more and more types of e-mountain bike with different amounts of suspension travel. And this is very much a traditional mountain bike thing. The character of those bikes is judged on their downhill performance. So we have capability based on suspension travel, but we now need to factor in different motors, different battery capacities. So we need to have some clarity on the uphill capability of these bikes as well. But before we get wrapped up into the different types of downhill and uphill e-mountain bikes, let's start at the beginning. Now, I think two key ways to look at different types of e-mountain bike is when you look at torque and also on suspension travel. For torque, look at numbers between 30 Newton meters and just over 100. And when it comes to suspension travel, you should be looking at bikes between 120 mil travel and 200. Now, in a very loose sense, more torque actually allows you to climb stronger, and more suspension travel allows you to descend faster. So we're now going to turn our attention to bikes with different amounts of torque and bikes with different amounts of travel. And we'll start on the Fire Road, a great entry point into your off-road adventures. Talking of which, I think entry-level e-mountain bikes or budget e-mountain bikes is a great place to start. Now, I think at the moment, there are lots of e-mountain bikes which are 5 figures, and I personally find that a little bit unacceptable. But the good news for you guys is that you can actually get high performance at half that amount. For example, bikes such as this Canyon Neuron On is £5,100, lots of fuel in the tank, and 22 kilos. Of course, the Neuron On is a full suspension bike. You can have less expensive bikes, but they are actually hardtails. So bikes such as the Grand Canyon On, £3,500. The Cube Stereo Reaction Hybrid Performance, which is under £2,000. And then, of course, you've got bikes such as the Decathlon range, which start at £1,000 too. So a hardtail is a great entry-level point into mountain biking. It's very difficult to determine what is budget because it's different people. But what I will say is that an entry-level bike, great for forest roads, and also you can come to trail centres where you get waymarked trails, which is a great way to start your e-mountain bike experience. Now, the second broad category of e-mountain bike that you might want to consider is a gearbox bike. Why? I think in general because of simplicity. Now, the gearbox bike is a rarity. It is quite unique. At the moment, I think the Pinion MGU is the key player in this segment. A motor gearbox unit is simply that. It's a motor and gearbox in one. I think these bikes are great for adventure rides. They're great for commuting. They're great in terms of the technology which they offer, such as the ability to switch gears whilst you're stationary. Like I said, they're low on maintenance because they're belt drive, so there's no derailleur, there's no cassette. And I think the feeling you get when you ride a bike like this, it's silent. And I think you really get a feeling for the grip on the tires as you ride down the hill. So I think a gearbox bike, even though they're rare, is certainly something you need to think about. Number 3, long or longer range eMTBs. Now, e-bikes come with different battery sizes. Battery size is a little bit like having different amounts of fuel in the tank. So if you are an average size or average weight rider and who wants to have longer or more extended days on an e-mounted bike, then a bike with more rather than less fuel is definitely a consideration. I think a battery capacity of say 600 watt hours or more is a great way to start, and you can achieve this in different ways. For example, you can have a bike which has got say a 6 or in this case a 750 watt hour battery in the down tube, or you can actually have bikes which carry 400 watt hours in the down tube and you can bolt on say a 250 watt hour range extender. Right, full suspension e-mountain bike should be a definite consideration. Think about the average suspension travel as being about 150 millimeters, so you can subtract more or less from that figure. Why would you want a full suspension e-mountain bike? Well, think about it this way. An eMTB will cover more ground and it'll actually cover that ground a lot faster. So even more need for comfort whilst you do so. An e-mountain bike will actually open up a whole new world of riding for you, and a full suspension bike will give you comfort, it'll give you control, it'll give you traction as well. Worth bearing in mind that buying a hardtail bike is actually, for most people, an economic decision rather than one based on the performance of the bike. So what have we got? Let's start off with, say, 120 mil travel e-mountain bike. Now, these bikes are great for smoother single tracks, maybe a forest road, such as we have in this environment here. And then you move up to bikes which are around about 150. That's the average. That's maybe the sweet spot for a lot of people. These bikes are great for exploration. They're great for maybe some of the tougher single track. And most e-mountain bikes do come in that category. If you go up in travel to say 165, 170, 180 mil, these bikes are now about speed and action. And with that, most of the time comes a slight increase in weight because of the downhill capability of the bikes. You're looking at bigger rotors, bigger tires, and bigger forks. Now, we've been showing Canyon bikes in the video so far. Most brands do actually give a fantastic range of high performance bikes in the different travel and price points. These bikes are just examples because they're the partners on the channel. Okay, torque. Now, I'm going to be very careful with torque because there are fine differences between how brands measure torque. But in general, I think it does give you a good idea of the climbing potential, how much grunt a bike has. I think the very fact that most bikes are categorized on downhill performance, I think with an e-mountain bike, there is potential here for bikes to be categorized on uphill performance too. So what I'm going to do now is give you what I believe is a useful classification just for you to think about when you're looking at these different bikes. So there could be 4 broad categories: very low torque, high torque, and very high torque. Starting off with very low, we're looking at hub drive bikes up to 50 Newton meters, low torque bikes from 50 Newton meters to 75 Newton meters, motors such as the Bosch SX, the TQ, and the Fazua Ride 60. Next up is the high torque bikes, 75 to 100 Newton meters, motors such as the Bosch CX, the Shimano EP801, the Yamaha PW, and also the Brose, Giant, Polini, and Specialized motors. And then, of course, are the very high torque bikes, which are 100 Newton meters plus. Motors such as the DJI, the Rocky Mountain, the Bafang, the Zax, and of course, the Ascol. Now, the most important thing to consider with torque is that it's actually a sliding scale in terms of uphill performance. So if we look to start at the top with very high torque bikes, why would you want a very high torque bike? Well, there's many factors, such as you might want performance in technical uphill terrain. You might want to climb very steep terrain. You might be a heavier rider, or in fact, you might be a rider who is up against the clock in a race situation. Now, one very thing to understand is that to harness that very high torque, at the same time, you actually need the skills to be able to understand overrun and weight distribution between the front and rear tires, and also the fact that the tire actually plays a key role in getting the most out of the torque of those bikes. Okay, now high torque e-mountain bikes. This is where you'll find the majority of mid-travel eMTBs. We're looking at between 75 and 100 Newton meters, and these bikes are a great balance between power delivery, and battery consumption, because let's face it, the more power you have, the more they're going to take from those batteries. A low torque e-mountain bike, possibly the most underrated e-mountain bike of the moment. We're looking at between 50 and 75 Newton meters. These bikes tend to be lower weight because of the smaller battery capacity, although there is the option of range extenders which fit into the water bottles. I think these bikes are absolutely perfect for more undulating trails and trail centers. Like I said, consider one of these because I think they are massively underrated. And then, of course, finally, you've got the very low torque bikes, which in general tend to be hub drives on hardtails, which are great for forest roads. Okay, folks, I hope that gives you a little bit more of an outline in terms of the different types of e-mountain bike that you might want to consider. Like I said at the start, I think some brands give you the option of going to mountain electric bikes and you've got to work it all out for yourself. And then some brands base their bikes on a category which is actually all about the downhill performance. Bikes such as trail bikes, all mountain bikes, enduro, super enduro, and downhill bikes. What that doesn't do is give you folks an idea of the uphill capability. But I think uphill is an equal part to the overall experience of riding an eMTB. So I think it's time, possibly, to build in a new classification. Let's know what you think.